Do you know some horror movies don't need jump scares or gore to really get under your skin? Horror movies that question religion always have that effect on me. Today, I want to share the ones that really stood out, so let's dive in. Saint Maud isn't scary because of jump scares. It's terrifying because of faith, or what faith becomes when it has nowhere to go but inward. Maud is a private nurse. She's young, devout, and deeply alone. And she believes God has chosen her to save the soul of a dying woman. But as her devotion intensifies, so does the silence from above. And when heaven doesn't answer, something else does. She begins to mistake her isolation for holiness, her delusions for divine instruction. Her suffering becomes a kind of prayer, pain as proof, loneliness as love. The horror isn't that she's possessed, it's that she's not. It's just Maud, trying to make meaning out of grief, guilt, and despair by wrapping it in ritual. The final scene? A moment of transcendence in her eyes, a moment of reality in ours. Religious horror hits different because it's not about belief. It's about the silence that follows it, the dread of being unseen, and the fear that maybe the voice you've been hearing all along was just your own, echoing back. Some prayers aren't meant to be spoken. Some gods aren't meant to be named. And in incantation, faith isn't a comfort. It's a curse you can't stop sharing. This isn't just a found-footage horror film. It's a confession. A desperate mother documenting her descent as she begs you to believe, not in her, but in something far older, something watching, something that feeds on worship like oxygen. The rituals in incantation feel familiar. Blessings, shrines, symbols, but twisted, corrupted, as if belief itself has turned feral. And what's worse, you're part of it. Every time she speaks to the camera, she's speaking to you, inviting you to say the words, to learn the symbols, to help her lift the curse, and in doing so, pass it along. The horror isn't just supernatural, it's the terror of inherited religion, traditions you don't understand but obey anyway. The burden of belief passed down like a disease, and the terrifying idea that faith can infect. By the end, you're not watching a horror movie, you're participating in one. And that's what makes incantation so disturbing, not just what it shows you, but what it asks of you. Because once you've been seen by that kind of God, you don't look away. You kneel.
Wouldst thou like to live deliciously?
That line lives in your head, doesn't it? But The Witch isn't just about witches. It's about what happens when your God turns his back and the woods start whispering instead. Set in Puritan New England, this is a family cast out for being too devout, too righteous for the righteous. They pray harder. They cling to Scripture. But the land is barren. The baby vanishes, and something wicked watches from the trees. It's not the devil that breaks them. It's the silence, the absence of grace. And in that absence, fear grows like rut. The family blames the girl, of course. Her budding womanhood becomes the scapegoat, her independence the sin. And slowly, their religion eats itself. That's the horror of The Witch. Not broomsticks or black goats, but the way faith becomes fear. The way love curdles into suspicion. And how salvation starts to look like a trap. So when Thomason finally says yes to the dark, it doesn't feel like corruption. It feels like freedom. It feels like truth. The Witch asks a terrifying question.
Wouldst thou like to live deliciously?
What if the devil doesn't seduce you? What if you go willingly because no one else was listening? There's pain, and then there's martyrs. This is not just a horror film, it's a sermon soaked in blood, a meditation on suffering, belief, and transcendence, but not the kind preached in churches. This one has no choir, just screams. At first, you think it's a revenge story. A girl escapes her childhood torture and comes back for answers. But answers don't come, only more pain. Then the film changes. It sheds its skin, and what's underneath is ritual. That's the horror of Martyrs. Not the violence, not even the cult, but the calm, calculated faith that suffering leads to revelation, that torment can be holy, that the divine demands flesh. By the end, you're not asking, what did she see? You're asking, was it worth it? And worse, you're afraid of the answer. It begins with silence, ancient ruins in Iraq, the clash of time and faith. And then a child's voice changes. The body bends, the lights flicker. But The Exorcist isn't just about possession. It's about doubt. A priest who's losing his faith. A mother who doesn't believe in anything until her daughter becomes unrecognizable, until medicine fails and science runs dry. That's when religion steps in, not as comfort, but as confrontation. This movie never rushes. It sits with you. It lets the horror simmer, not in jump scares, but in the weight of the unknown. The idea that evil is real, personal, and ancient. And when Father Karras stands before the demon, he's not just fighting for a girl. He's fighting for himself, for proof, for redemption. Because in the end, The Exorcist isn't just about the devil. It's about God and the terrifying silence between the two. The crucifix doesn't glow, the prayers don't always work, but sometimes, in the darkest moments, faith is the only thing left. That's what makes The Exorcist holy and horrifying. In Midsommar, grief is the gateway. A girl loses everything and follows her boyfriend to Sweden, to a commune dressed in white, to rituals older than memory, where time doesn't pass, it circles. At first, it feels like anthropology. Look at the dancing. Look at the flowers. Look at the way they all breathe together. But slowly, the customs stop being charming and start becoming sacred. Bodies bend. Old people fall. New gods are crowned. And in the center of it all, Donnie. She came with nothing. She was invisible, forgotten. But they saw her, not as a burden, but as chosen. This is where Midsommar reveals itself, not as a horror movie about cults, but about conversion. When your grief is so loud, you'll follow anyone who listens, even if they wear antlers, even if they burn people alive, because feeling chosen is sometimes stronger than feeling safe. Salem's Lot is vampire horror, yes, but it's also spiritual horror, because when the town goes cold and the windows are nailed shut, you turn to the church. But what if the church is scared too? Father Callahan tries to fight it. He holds up the cross. He invokes the name. But Barlow, that creature from the dark, isn't afraid of words. He's older than ritual. He knows the difference between faith and performance. And when the priest wavers, even for a moment, he's unmade. This is the fear at the heart of Salem's Lot. What happens when your faith is tested by something that isn't metaphor? Not sin, not guilt, but a thing with claws, with hunger, with proof. And once you've seen it, once you've known what's out there, you don't get to believe like you used to. Not in God, not in safety, not in daylight, because evil came to town, and the holy man ran. These horror movies have shown us that religion isn't always salvation. Sometimes it's the illusion that keeps the real evil hidden. Sometimes it's the very thing that breaks when the darkness knocks. And sometimes it's the only light we have left, even if it flickers. Thank you for watching. Tell me in the comments, is religion in horror movies just a backdrop, or is it the real battleground? I'm out.